My people of this country and we're under attack. They banning us, they cancel us for speaking the facts. If you man enough, come stand with us, take USA back. And every time we pull up, all you're gonna see is American flags. American flags. American flags. And every time we pull up, all you're gonna see is American.
Welcome everybody to the Raising Cain Show. I'm excited tonight. We have an incredible guest, and Pat Wood. He's a distinguished authority on sustainable development, the green economy, and historic technocracy movement. He's the author of Technocracy Rising and co-author of Trilaterals Over Washington. Wood unveils hidden agendas of the Trilateral Commission and their role in shaping the new international economic order. In this episode, we're going to explore the critical implication of the petrodollar's demise on the U.S. economy. So I'm looking forward, guys, to introducing you to this topic. Some of you may know about it, some of you might not. It's something that I've been aware of for a very long time. Years ago, somebody introduced me to this idea of the petrodollar, and basically it had a lot to do with why we had so many wars in the Middle East. So without much further, I want to just go ahead and hand over the mic to you, Pat. And if you want to say anything additionally about what you're working on and kind of what your background is, please do so.
Wow. Well, okay. The Trilateral Commission was indeed the originator of the so-called New International Economic Order. Started in 1973 by Zbigniew Brzezinski and David Rockefeller. These were in my opinion, the rats that got us to where we are today. Unfortunately, or fortunately, both Brzezinski and Rockefeller died recently. So they're not here to enjoy the fruit of their labor, but the rest of us are eating sawdust and coal now, lumps of coal, right? Mm-hmm. But I've studied finance all these years because my background first was in finance and economics. That's why I was interested in this whole business in the first place back in the 1970s. So I have an interesting perspective, perhaps. It doesn't really show in my resume per se, but the blurb that everybody reads about my involvement with sustainable development, stuff like that, technocracy. But nevertheless, the country we're in a lot of trouble right now. Everybody knows that. I think that's intuitive at this point. If anybody doesn't feel like there's something really rotten going on, they just not paying attention. So, just to kick the conversation off, I suppose we're going to talk about the petrodollar. We're going to talk about what the history of that is.
That's a great place to start.
Yeah, and why is going to lead eventually to the establishment of CBCDs. That's the central bank digital currency scheme that's coming soon. Not today, but soon. So anyway, I'll leave it at that for now.
So on the historical context of the petrodollar, can you explain for our audience the origins and importance of the petrodollar system?
You bet. You wouldn't be surprised that Henry Kissinger was involved in that back in 1974 with the whole scheme. He was his hands were in everything that had to do that. He was an original founding member of the Trilateral Commission, by the way. That's no surprise probably, but he was one of those global elitists at that time that just was everywhere, as was Brzezinski and Rockefeller himself.
Wasn't George Bush Sr. also part of that as well?
Oh yes, he was, absolutely, from the get-go.
I thought I remember seeing his name, associated with it. And yes. Brzezinski, his daughter, isn't she a host on MSNBC?
Oh yes, like Mika.
That's right, Mika Brzezinski. That's right.
I know. I'm sure there's Brzezinski's in Poland. That's where they were from.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not. That's not a very common name in America for sure. So yeah, Mika is his daughter. Interestingly enough, he also has a son. Nobody knows much about him, but his name is Mark. Mark grew up and he became a member of the Trilateral Commission in his own right now. And guess where he's now located? As the ambassador to Poland.
Interesting.
And right, this sticking his fingers in all the things with Ukraine and Russia, and it's like, oh man, you can't make this stuff up. These people just keep showing up in places of power, like Antony Blinken, for instance. He's a member of the Trilateral Commission, or Secretary of State. Yeah. So anyway, that has nothing to do with petrodollars per se.
So Nixon, was it Nixon that was basically involved in this whole thing, and taking this off the gold standard? And
yes, absolutely so. And what people believed back in those days was that Nixon was a Rockefeller man. That's what people call him. They said the same thing about Henry Kissinger. But Nixon was not acting in his own behalf. Let's say he was more an agent for what Rockefeller had in his mind at that point. Same thing with Kissinger. Kissinger, however, was more central to the power structure than Nixon ever was, and hence Kissinger became a founding member of the Trilateral Commission. So, but nevertheless, when gold was removed from the dollar, that was a sea change of magnitude, and lots of stuff happened back then. Besides gold going from trading at like $35 an ounce back then, to as rise floating on the free market. But the main thing to take away is that the dollar now became a fiat currency. We led the way on that. Mm-hmm. All the nations of the world followed us into that scheme, where all the currencies of the world today are fiat currencies. Well, the main thing about fiat,
real quick, for folks that don't understand the word fiat, basically it has no meaning. It has no backing. It's not backed by. It's backed by whatever the government says it is.
Exactly, and like we used to be backed by gold. The Swiss franc was that continued with gold for a while. It's not anymore, but other currencies had gold and silver and other stuff like that. But it all got unhinged at that point, where all the currencies of the world floated against each other. Now, this proposed a problem for Rockefeller and his henchman Kissinger. They had to do something to gain an edge with their currency. That's the dollar. They wanted to make sure that the dollar was going to be a supremo ever. And, they figured, okay, here's the scheme that we're going to do. And you have to remember at that point, all of our oil was imported. We're not self-sufficient in those days. So we had a huge bill from oil countries, where we were importing oil and paying it with dollars. So here's the problem. How do you repatriate those dollars into our country again? Well, you make a handshake agreement with like Saudi Arabia and the other countries selling to us, that they would make basically pledge to spend their money, dollars, whatever, with us, for airplanes, tanks, stuff. All stuff like that, right?
A lot of arms deals and things like that.
Whatever. Yeah, exactly. There was other things. I don't want to make fun of the light of the military aspect, but that was huge back then, honestly.
Yeah. That's what Eisenhower warned about, right? He warned about the military industrial complex, which to me, he nailed it on the head, which
Yes.
was that we needed a permanent armistice, industry. But the problem is that because everything's driven by money and it's driven, by making more bombs, more planes, more weapons, that if I believe he said if they ever gain the reins of, policy, or if they ever, got into the business of making policy, they would never sue for peace, but always sue for war because it would be more profitable.
Exactly. So in any case, this was the problem back then. They had to have some way to recycle those money, the dollars that were being spent overseas. And so Kissinger went to the Mideast, and remember there's other stuff going on over there at that time also. We had the switch over in Iran, for instance, Persia, where the Shah of Iran was deposed. Kissinger's hands were all over that thing,
which of course led to the rise of the Islamic Socialist Republic, right?
Exactly. So what Kissinger did with Saudi Arabia especially was talk them into kind of a gentleman's agreement. We'll buy your stuff, you spend your money with us. That's pretty much the deal. However, there was not a formal agreement ever signed. There was never a treaty. There was never an agreement in that sense that the Congress had to be involved with. And however, this has matured over the years. Saudi Arabia and other countries have honored that pledge, if you will. It was in their best interest to do that anyway, because they made billions and billions of dollars in the process, and they got all the military hardware they could stuff down their airports over there. So this was hugely beneficial for those countries and for us at the same time. This whole complex became known as the Petrodollar complex. And
so how did that system contribute to U.S. economic and geopolitical power?
Well, in itself, it really didn't in a direct sense, because the whole purpose of it was to maintain dollar hegemony in the world market. That served us all over the place, because for instance, as Saudi Arabia, for instance, got $1 billion of our dollars, they could spend it in Europe, for instance, for goods from Europe. Well, that bolsters our economy at the same time. So you get leverage with money. This was what Rockefeller was such a master of. You get leverage when people use your money in particular, but it was all about the flow of money. So anywhere that we have banks, for instance, like Citibank, Bank of America, the big ones, J.P. Morgan, Chase, when you have these companies, banks, issuing loans in dollars, which was the preferred currency at that time. Well, all those loans that made in interest for those banks, they had to be eventually repaid to the originating bank. So if somebody, say Germany, came and borrowed say $1 billion from Citicorp, or anybody else would write it for them. If they took that money and they converted it into another currency, say the franc or the German mark or whatever, well, eventually when that debt came due, they have to switch back into dollars again to pay off the bank, because the bank, if they issue the loan in the first place in dollars, it has to be repaid in dollars. I hope you're following with me here.
Mhm.
But here's what happens. If they lose their shirt, whatever they invested in, it doesn't matter. The banks want that original money back in their pocket in dollars. Well, this also sprung a new industry of dollar-denominated debt all over the world, to the point where even foreign banks were issuing dollars or loans in dollars, where they were shelling out dollars to companies they wanted to buy them from them. And in the end, when it all settles out, all those loans have to be paid in dollars. This is one reason that the dollar has not completely crashed, because all these, and when we talk a lot loans, you're talking about trillions of dollars in loans that have been issued over the decades.
Right.
They can't walk away from this.
No,
because
and
the
it's like
banks are not going to let them do that.
and this is a basic, supply and demand, issue that
Yes.
if you have a massive supply of US dollars that's out there circulating, and we don't have a means of being able to bring that back, doesn't it stand a chance to devalue the dollar significantly?
Well, the dollar has been devalued ever since the Federal Reserve came into existence in 1913. Today, you have about 99% of the value of the dollar is gone. They've shaved it off over the years through inflation and other, just some cases just stealing it. But the dollar has been devalued consistently over the years, even in modern times as well. People talk about back to 2000, for instance, how much the dollar has lost in purchasing power. It's just huge. Well, that was the plan from the get-go, for sure. But nevertheless, the circulation of dollars has always been controlled by the banks, the big banks, and central banks as well. The IMF is involved too. The World Bank is involved as well. But the circulation of money, which was all about the petrodollar in the first place, we've got to keep that money flowing freely. We didn't want them to just sell it and buy gold bars and just sit on them. No, we want you to circulate that money, to give it to somebody else, buy something from and get the gold, the economy moving. So go ahead.
There was an article that you sent me called the Truth About What's Happening to the Petrodollar, and the article clarifies that while the petrodollar system's in trouble, that it's not dead. But most global oil transactions are still conducted in US dollars. But this could change as countries like those in the BRICS bloc seek alternatives. And this is what's weird, right? So in this article, it seems to indicate that there's a lot of misleading information, exaggerated claims, and things like that. On the other hand, I've seen another article by, I think it was an American Federalist, and their summary, the summary of their article, the article is the end of the petrodollar is the end of America's global dominance. And in their article, they get into basically the rise of alternative currencies like the Chinese yuan, and the impact of U.S. energy policies, and a whole lot of things with the Biden administration, being involved in this. So I guess my question to you is, what are the actual indicators of the petrodollar being in trouble rather than dead? Or is it dead? Or is it going to be dead? I mean, where are we going from there?
Boy, that's a good question. It's going to, at some point, it's going to be deader than a doornail. That's not because the petrodollar disappears, but because all currencies are slated to disappear at some point. And this is what Rockefeller saw back in 1973. For fiat money to exist, it eventually collapses, it has to be.
It's like a Ponzi scheme.
Exactly. It's a mathematical certainty that the system will blow up at some point in the future. He knew that. That's why they made all the arrangements to try and accumulate assets and like land, mines, oil, etc., to themselves, so that they can control those resources. And at that point, it doesn't matter what you give people, but it could be buffalo chips. It doesn't matter. If people, you got it, they want it, well, then you're going to charge them a lot, their firstborn for it. So the scheme, I remember, and recently, I think it was last year, there was a lady, her name was Pippa Malmgren. She was from the city of London, a financial expert. I think a wealth manager was her position, whatever, but she was a bigwig for sure. And her dad, she said, was active with Nixon back in that day to decouple the dollar from the gold. Nevertheless, she looks like maybe she's 60 years old now. But what Malmgren said, stunningly, she might have got it spanked for it, for letting the cat out of the bag. But she said all of the paper currencies are slated to be destroyed at some point. It says it's all going to blockchain eventually. And she just blurted this out. I was stunned when somebody sent me the clip. Whoa, she just really, let it out there. I've been saying this for a long time because I've studied the nature of money, and theoretically, the dollar can't go out of existence, and everything else stays in place. That's not going to happen. If the dollar goes kaboom, all of the currencies of the world are going to go kaboom with it.
Right.
That's a problem now. This is not just about this currency, that currency, whatever you got in your pocket sort of thing. This is going to blow up the entire financial system if this happens.
This American Federalist article, I learned a term that I think I'd heard it before, but it just never stuck with me. But I caught on to it because one of the things that I noticed is the media is not talking about this. Like they are dead silent about this. And what my understanding is that Saudi Arabia basically this is the first time they've ever not renewed, this agreement to do this. And I guess part of the reason there's no, there's no talk in the markets is because the stock market's still doing fairly well. It's growing and all that, but despite a weak economy, the term though is called TINA. There is no alternative. So in other words, investors are basically putting their money in stocks because they got no other place to put it. But eventually it's all going to come down to collapsing, especially with anything where we are tied to my understanding is anything that we're tied to that's outside of the United States, which is a lot. We import a lot of stuff. So this trade deficit is going to have just a massive impact.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And by the way, the trade deficit, this is something nobody really understands. Financial writers don't understand what happens when they say, well, we have a $50 billion trade deficit this year. That means that people bought more from us than we bought from them. So every time you have a dollar going out in a deficit situation, that's money that's wealth that has been milked off of us, and it goes somewhere else in the world.
Well, I'll give you an example of something that was kind of interesting, of where there's just a massive disparity in terms of the whole green energy thing. We got all this push for green energy here in the United States, and of course most of it we're importing from China, right? A lot of these solar panels, the windmill technology, which is nothing green about it, all of that. But what's even the cobalt used for the batteries and lithium. What amazes me though is I have a 9-acre property and it's cut in half by CSX Railroad. And yesterday I was sitting there counting the car loads full of coal. I counted 156 carloads of coal. Yes. And they're leaving our country. These are heading down to a port somewhere where they're getting shipped overseas to places like China, Brazil, India, all the BRIC nations. Yes. So meanwhile, we're shutting down our energy production and we're moving to make ourselves more dependent on other countries for energy, but we're sending coal to all around the world where, they can, to the BRIC nations in particular are the biggest buyers of it. And so that's another question I have for you is how are the BRIC nations influencing the potential decline of the petrodollar?
Well, that's a good question too. The BRICS nations are ganging up on the dollar right now. They've figured out that there's currencies that they could trade in, not the dollar, and they're increasingly using other currencies to buy and sell. In fact, there's never been a treaty in place that said a country has to buy from us in US dollars or anybody else for that matter. It's always been voluntary in one sense, that if whatever you want, wherever you can find an economic advantage for yourself, do it. Well, today, however, these BRICS nations now, they're getting together and assessing their own currencies now. They're figuring out now, well, we have enough economic power. We're not like as big as the U.S. was or is now. We have our own economic power, economic interest, and so let's just do some business together. Well, that makes sense from their point of view. You'd probably do the same thing. Why not? Back in 1973, the United States was the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Mm-hmm. Basically, everybody had to come to us for everything, and we could leverage anything in the world. But since then, we know our economic system, especially vis-a-vis China, India, especially a big one. Brazil is another big one. These economies have risen.
Now Mexico and Saudi Arabia, they're all like joining and becoming part of this.
That's right. So you see these other interests that are looking at each other now, and they can say, well, we can combine our might, and all of a sudden we look like a midget to them. Not quite a midget, but you get my point. We have decreased in size proportionally to the rest of the world. That's all I'm saying. And China, especially, the huge factor here. They've had a huge growth spurt over the last 30 years, and they've now rival us in a lot of ways.
A growth spurt, which, by the way, we made possible for them.
Yes, you're exactly right.
They basically have stolen all of our technology and have turned it against us essentially. And then we wonder when we see the Biden administration, or you see the Biden family having made billions of dollars in these back alley deals with China. It's all very suspect. We've got to cut to a break and to give our sponsors a word, and we will be right back with a lot more great discussion on this topic.
Military use when they need unlimited power during critical missions. Civilians like you can now get their hands on the exact same technology within 24 hours for pennies on the dollar. Folks, as a former infantry soldier, I can tell you this is the best and cheapest way to get reliable, unlimited energy. And no, I'm not talking about regular generators or the expensive solar panels. You don't have to be an electrician to do it. There's no maintenance needed. It doesn't take up a lot of space. And the best part, You won't need to rely on the power grid anymore. Click below now and hit play.
All right, so next up we have Julius here, and he's from his company Eco Inventions.
That's correct.
And he has the Eco Washer. Now, I see it says never buy laundry detergent again.
Right.
I think the laundry detergent people are going to be after this.
Yeah, they're probably not going to like you.
What can my Eco Washer Special Edition model do? Everything! We eliminate all the toxic poisons in your home. No more detergent, no more fabric softeners, no more hot water. Sound too good to be true? It's not. Where did this technology come from? This technology literally came from the hospital industry. There's a super expensive commercial Oculus ozone laundry system used in hospitals worldwide. How did we create the Eco Washer SE? We simply miniaturized it using the advent of microtechnology. These are like a solid state computer. No filters, no fillers, no ingredients, nothing. It runs the water through and transforms the water into an unlimited supply of nature's pure detergent and nature's pure cleaning supplies that will mop your floors, wash your carpet, take pesticide off of your fruits, veggies, fish, meats, and it'll make everything last much longer when you put it in the refrigerator. Hey, stop supporting these corporate chemical villains and step up and get your Eco Washer SE today. The new Eco Washer SE is a chemical-free laundry and cleaning solution. Imagine no more detergent, no more chemicals, saves you money, pays for itself, gives you a healthier life, and simplifies doing laundry. And now we're going to include 2 free Thunder Pure Safe Air Minis that purifies your home and sanitizes your surfaces like a thunderstorm in nature, eliminates all odors. Plus, you're receiving $100 off by using code podcast on the new Eco Washer SC. Let me remind you, 2 free Thunder Pure Safe Air Minis plus $100 off during this podcast. Podcast is your coupon code at
Born in the coastal plains of South Texas, Smoking Gun Coffee is founded by combat veterans that know exactly what a cup of coffee needs to taste like. Run by father and son, each coffee bean is perfected, roasted at 500 degrees, and cooled with a Gulf Coast breeze. Smoking Gun Coffee hand makes and bags each ounce of coffee for maximum customer satisfaction. With every purchase, 10% goes back to organizations that help veterans and local communities. That's Texas made, one bag at a time. To find out more, go to www.smokingguncoffee.com.
And we're back. Thanks, folks, for listening. You know, our sponsors are how we keep this show going. And you can find out more information if you want to find the promo code. You can find that down in the show notes. So I want to get back into this, and you know, we know that where we left off basically is that we're in some serious trouble. Things are going to go downhill, and you know exactly when that happens. I don't think anybody knows, you know, the exact date of when it's all going to come unraveling, but it will. So my question to you is, I guess, what's the future of the global economic order? You know, what are the potential replacements for the petrodollar that you see, that you can foresee, and how might the transition to other currencies affect global economic stability and power dynamics?
Okay, here we go. Big question for sure. We need to remember that all of these currencies currently are floating against each other. There's no set peg virtually anywhere in the world today. So in this free-floating system, psychology shifts back and forth. Events happen where it favors one currency to another. You know, next, the yuan might get hit. Next, it doesn't get hit. Now we get hit. Another currency get, maybe the euro takes a hit. We don't take a hit. They float against each other. This is going to continue. It has to be. This has been the way it has been since 1972, at least. So when we look at what the BRICS Union is doing now, ganging up, trying to form some kind of a float mechanism to make their currencies more useful than ours. This is what that's all about. But all of these plans, I have to stress this, all of these plans that people have to shore up their currency, their assets, whatever, is all going to fail at some point, because no fiat currency will exist at that point. And here's the problem. What are they going to replace it with? What's going to take the place? Well, this is where we see these central bank digital currencies coming into play, all based on blockchain, for one, all able to track every transaction in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I think this is what led Klaus Schwab, for instance, the World Economic Forum, to say a couple years ago that by 2030 you'll own nothing and be happy. That's a ludicrous statement at the time, but as you get closer to 2030, he might be thinking, yeah, that could happen. And let me tell you how it could happen, because all of our system today is based on debt, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are a debt. Forget the petro just for now. Everything we have in the world now is based on debt. The dollar itself, the paper dollar, is a debt instrument. When you borrow money for your house, your car, stuff like that, that's debt. Companies borrow money for whatever, and it creates debt. And all that interest has to be paid back to somebody for the use of the money. It all goes back to the banks. The banks are the only people that really make any money in the system are the banks, the super banks, especially.
Well, we're seeing right now, like in the housing market, you've got, big investment firms like BlackRock buying up whole neighborhoods and then renting them back, renting back
Yes.
the houses to the
Yes.
people. So they don't, I mean, I look at like real estate, for example, has been probably the best source of economic growth for the individual, right?
Yes.
Everybody can generally, as long as your credit's halfway decent, you can buy a home. And the advantage is, of course, is you're getting that equity, instead of the bank getting it. When you're
Yes.
renting, you're basically, my father always taught me, when you're renting, you're basically pissing your money away. And so is that the end game for these guys? They're going to own everything and we're going to own nothing.
That seems to be the idea that they're giving us with statements like what Klaus Schwab says. And look at this way. We're moving towards a pay-per-view world, so to speak, where everything's going to be rented.
Yeah.
Your house is going to be rented. Whatever you have, a car can be rented, of course. Where you don't have anything to call your own, per se, and even down to mundane things like the clothes that you have. That all these things could be rented from somebody. The idea, who, of course, from Schwab's point of view, as we listened to him say that, well, if we don't own it, who does? Somebody has to own this stuff. If you're saying we don't own it, who the heck is going to own it? Well, how about BlackRock or some other huge banks, central banks, etc. These people can accumulate all these resources debt free, I might add, and they can take that and use it as leverage against us to extract rental fees for everything in the end. And we see this move already starting.
Mm-hmm.
Houses is a perfect example. I see this in Mesa, in Phoenix, in Arizona, where these signs all over the place. We'll pay top dollar for your house, cash out immediately,
right.
Sort of thing. And
We buy ugly houses. I think I've seen the signs, you know?
exactly. They don't care what it is, but they stuff these houses into their inventory. They're paying cash money for it because they have so much cash in their portfolio already. They don't need to have,
and they know that cash is going to be worthless in a very short amount of time.
Yes. So, you know, then of course the next question is, incidentally, if you rent a house from somebody like a BlackRock, who's going to pay the maintenance of the house to keep it updated and repaired? Well, they're not going to want to do that in particular because they don't want to spend money after the fact. It may be you have to do it if you want to get your roof fixed or whatever, but everybody has tales to tell about poor landlords just turning a property into a piece of crap, and you have to live in it and pay the same money for it.
You know, I remember I lived in Japan for 3 years, and they had an interesting thing there. A lot of people, their homes, they had their mortgages were 99-year mortgages.
Yes.
It was no longer 20-year mortgage or 30-year mortgage, you know, and they have unique situation in there that like 15% of Japan is like arable, where they can actually build on. So they have a lot of people in a very small area that they can actually build. But I remember Alan Greenspan, when he was leaving, he, you know, gave a speech, and he was talking about that he foresaw, and this was before, I think, the collapse, but he foresaw that they would have to come up with interesting instruments for people to be able to, you know, afford to buy a home. If property values continued to rise the way they were going, they were going to have to go to, you know, like 90-year leases, like, you know, other countries do. So I think that will probably happen. You know, I would say that it seems to me, at least, it makes sense that the best thing that we can do as citizens, you know, is to try to own real assets, you know, and not keep a lot of money, you know, in you know, US dollars, but try to keep, you know, if you're, you know, most of us are just living paycheck to paycheck though. So what are the kinds of things that people can do, you know, to prepare themselves for this? I mean, obviously I look at like anything that's imported, forget about it. That's going to be extremely expensive. You know, things that you can, you know, things that are made here, maybe won't be as affected, you know, as bad, unless we're making it here really cheap and we're exporting it all because the US dollar is so low now. See, this is what I'm afraid of, like energy. You know, why are we sending all of our coal overseas? Because the dollar's losing its value, and they can buy it, you know, for pennies on the dollar. So that's my concern, is that whatever we do produce, we're going to be forced to sell it, you know, overseas, you know, to you know, the big corporations. That's what they're going to do, because obviously it's about the bottom line for them. They got to make money, and they're going to, you know, we're going to end up with like basically like a false scarcity of things.
Yes, we have not. I don't think we've had a budget surplus in this country for decades.
No.
And it's getting worse all the time. I remember the shock, even like in 1995, a $20 billion surplus in 1 month, or excuse me, a deficit in 1 month. Yeah, just shocking. Now we'd be happy to have that. Today we're, you know, they're upwards of $100 million, or excuse me, $100 billion in trade deficit. That's over $1 trillion of our wealth getting shipped overseas.
Yeah,
this is our wealth. We can't afford to do that. There was never a mandate that our wealth, in other words, the stuff that comes out of our land and made in our country, there was never a mandate to share our wealth with the rest of the world. rather than consuming it ourselves, spending it on our own infrastructure to make our country great. This has been the plan, apparently, of this new international economic order. They just screwed us blind, and
Now,
it's continued to this day.
Do you see a tie in all of this economic stuff that's going on with, like, I for the life of me, I cannot figure out why the hell we keep pouring good money after bad in regards to the Ukraine. Look, I have nothing but compassion for the people of the Ukraine and what they're dealing with, but we're borrowing money basically to give to another country. And I think Russia just tried to have a peace negotiation, and and Zelensky turned it down. So there doesn't seem to be any interest in NATO to sue for peace. It seems like they're trying to drive us into a World War III type of scenario.
Exactly.
And I'm concerned about that as well. Does that have anything to do with what's going on, with this petrodollar shift, or the global shift of our economies? And, what are your thoughts on that?
It really could. Anywhere there's war, it provides a smokescreen for everything else that's going on in the world right now. We see, like, what's happening in Ukraine. We see the same thing happen in Israel, for instance. When bullets are flying, everybody's concerned about people dying, and they should be, I suppose. But that's not. I don't think that's the big story here, honestly. The fact that, and by the way, I have to document the fact that there was no treaty per se that expired on the petrodollar. It's been unraveling incrementally for several years, and it's going to continue to unravel incrementally in the future, maybe faster in the future. But the big thing today is the power that the central banks are accumulating to themselves with all this talk about digital IDs for every person on the planet, for this concept of digital currencies, which will, by the way, put all the banks out of business, because they want to. The intent of the central bank's digital currencies is to create consumer accounts where you can put your money into the central bank directly. You're not ever going to put it in a bank again. So the commercial banks are going to be completely wiped out when the central banks get this power. They're putting everything that they can into it right now in research, and it's not here yet, but it's very close. Maybe by 2030, they'll have it all together where it will operate just like they want it to. But if that day ever comes, the world is going to be put into a scientific dictatorship where everything is surveilled, everything is going to be monitored and controlled.
Feels like we're already there.
Well,
I mean,
we can see that. We can see the building blocks.
Yeah,
we're not. Yeah. They're not all together, but we see what they're doing, and we might have time politically to stop it if anybody would care to do that. But
there was a bill that was passed in West Virginia that by our state legislature that basically it made it illegal for credit card companies to to mark that somebody was buying ammo or gun purchases because they were doing that. And so to me, the only salvation I guess I could see for our republic is if the states start taking back their rights.
Yes.
Start taking back those the rights that are not enumerated to the federal government. They start basically going after the federal government and telling the federal government, screw you, we're not going to abide by whatever you're going to do. We've got to do some things to empower the states so that we have that state sovereignty again.
Exactly.
Because that's my biggest concern. And I've thought about this. I was running for Congress, and one of the things on my platform was I saw the need for a state trust bank so that when the inevitable CBDC comes into play, you could take whatever you're paid in, if you're paid in CBDC, and go and exchange it for gold and silver. Because within the Constitution, it actually states that it says that the states have the right to mint gold and silver coinage, and to be used as legal tender. And that's the key. We got plenty of gold stackers and silver stackers that are out there, but the problem is you can't take a buffalo round and walk into a grocery store and go buy a gallon of milk and a loaf of bread. And what we need is a true parallel economy that actually has a state currency that we can use as legal tender that is based on something that is real and tangible, and that is not going to be used for surveillance. That way I can pay my mortgage with CBDC, but if I want to go buy guns and ammo, I can go exchange it for gold and silver and go buy guns and ammo. That's the only salvation that I can see in this whole thing.
And there are some states have been waking up to this. Arizona, for instance, have passed legislation recently, not this year, but in past, making it illegal for us to issue a currency here based on silver or gold.
Yeah.
Not Texas, every state,
Tennessee, Montana, and Nevada are all issuing, they've got these gold backs and stuff that they're doing. So, but we need silver denominations too, because you need the smaller denominations. So
we also have some states that are waking up to what the central bank system is up to with all the shenanigans they're going to be putting in with these CBCDs. And there's legislation working through to outlaw that in a state. Could a state do that? I think they could. So, there's glimmer of hope. But on a national basis, probably the people that are in Washington right now have no clue what's coming at them right now. And
what I learned through my campaign and in that experience of running, the money involved in politics is so prolific. I mean, I'm talking, my opponent, he was given, there was $700,000 that came from a cryptocurrency company into a dark pool money fund to basically run advertising 7 days before the election. Now, nobody knows where that money came from. Could have come from another country. Doesn't matter. It's all perfectly legal. And the fact is that these guys that are down there in Washington, it takes millions of dollars to get elected now. So they're beholden. Unfortunately, they're beholden. And so why would they go and do anything that is going to, go against, what the wishes are of, BlackRock, State Street, and, Vanguard and any of these other, big investment firms? Because at the end of the day, they know to get elected, they're going to need massive amounts of capital.
That's right.
So I really think that the salvation, of our republic is going to come from the states. That's the only place that I can see it.
Yes, I would say that, and local communities. There's lots of low-hanging fruit in your cities and your counties that could be harvested, if you will. And every citizen, we have to live somewhere with people around, by and large, unless you live in the middle of a 1,000-acre ranch or something out of the country. But we're social beings, and we can get together with people in our city, in our neighborhoods, and our city council people, all the boards and stuff that regulate stuff in the city. You can be a part of the system. You can be a part of the system to where you can make a difference, substantial difference in what happens in the future in your own city. I've been saying this for years now, that the ultimate firewall that you can put around yourself is in your community. That's the ultimate firewall, and it should spread from there to your county level and then to your state level.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up, 5 minutes on the to the end of the hour here, but I wanted to, give an opportunity. There were some questions early on, and I think, a lot of folks are concerned and they're wondering, like, how soon is this going to happen? How is this, and I realize that, nobody has a crystal ball, but I mean, and like you said, it's been a slow burn. I mean, the dollar has been unraveling for quite some time. There's some other things too, I think, that also impact things. One of it is that, if we can get to the point of where we were under the Trump administration, where we have energy independence again, where we're not dependent on buying oil from anybody else, I think that would put us into a very good position, because if they can lower the cost of electricity, again, we're producing something here and we can use it here, then we're not affected by those differences in the valuations of currency.
That's exactly right. You're absolutely right.
So I think that hopefully, and I'm praying that Trump gets in there, because I don't think we can handle another 4 years of the guy that we have in there now. I think he will put the final nail in the coffin if he gets in there another 4 years. Any I guess predictions or any kind of what are your thoughts about where we go from here? You mentioned about getting involved in your local communities. I know, like, for me, this has there's a Citizens Action Coalition group that I've joined, and I'm starting one out here in this region of West Virginia. And there's a lot of good things that these people, I've seen them do in helping each other and helping one another out. And I think I think we're going to need more of that kind of thing. But what other kinds of things can people do?
Well, that's a good start. I wouldn't be too concerned about the national election right now. People are going to spend all their waking hours worrying about it, it's not worth it, because it's not going to change anything. The only thing that's going to change for you is what you do in your own community. So quit looking at the Washington, D.C. to come out and save you. You're going to save yourself where you live right now. And if you cannot steal, STEEL, steal your community or your state, there's going to be no hope for you in the end.
And it starts by being, getting to know your neighbors and being good neighbors with them.
It really does. It really does.
I where I live, I know most of my neighbors. We're all very well, heavily armed, and and we're all, we all have, like-mindedness in terms of freedom and self-determination. And one of the things that, like I grow my own garden, I raise my own chickens. Not everybody has the ability to do that, but, people have skills and things that they can barter and trade with. And I think it's a good thing to make sure that you have usable skills.
Exactly. And just remember, the battle starts here for you, not in the stuff that you do. It starts right here with your mindset. If you have the right mindset, you'll figure out the ways to survive and be effective in your community. If you don't have the right mindset, like, for instance, you have a woke mindset or something, where you're looking at the butterflies and bullfrogs or whatever,
unicorn farts.
you're just going to be caught in like the deer in the headlights, But for clear thinking people who are willing to be in each other's lives, you'll hold on to reality more than the other people. And we have to remember that reality is fleeting right now. It's going out the back door. I've written several articles on this. We're approaching the Matrix movie at this point.
Oh, when people can't, when you can't call a woman or a man a man. I mean, I think we've lost the reality train left the station a long time ago.
Exactly. So, we need to be cognizant that we can also be deceived if we're not careful. But you can safeguard yourself against that. And otherwise, don't sit home and just think, oh, woe is me. My life is over. My useful is over. Don't think that way. Go out and make a difference in somebody's life. You can do it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Pat, for coming on, and I really appreciate your insights. And thanks everybody that joined the show today. Wow, we had a pretty big number of people that were watching, and we're grateful for you guys joining the show. And wanted to say God bless you. And I always like to end my show in a prayer. You know, I'm on this network here with the Patriots Prayer, and so I see, you know, let's go ahead and end in prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you for Pat, Lord. I thank you for his insights. I thank you for the show and the people that were watching. I pray, Lord, that we can get something useful out of this, Lord, and that we will not be afraid, that we will rise up in our communities to help one another, to help, you know, our neighbors, and to be able to survive and get through these dark times that are coming ahead. We don't fret, but we put our trust in you, and we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, hey, thank you for coming. And, you know, I'd like to have you on again and get into some more of these other things too. And maybe even talk about some of your books.
You bet. Love to do that.
All right. You take care.
Bye-bye.
My people of this country, and we're under attack. They banning us, they cancel us for speaking the facts. If you man enough, come stand with us, take USA back. And every time we pull up, all you're gonna see is American flag.